There we
Hey
go.
guys,
Hey,
Hey.
how are you?
can you hear me okay?
Yeah, now we can hear you.
Okay,
How's it going?
great. I'm sorry if the good. How are you guys?
Not bad,
I'm
not
doing
bad.
good.
Pandemic, how
You
it
know,
is.
yeah, exactly.
So how are you feeling with
Yeah.
all this pandemic? Because usually you have a lot of projects during the year. This must be must be a little
Yeah,
frustrating for you.
yeah. Very frustrating. Very frustrating. We're usually on the road like 280 days of the year or more. So yeah, that's tough. Uh, and in addition to that, I mean, the stuff at home, we're still doing that. It's really performance more than anything, and that's
Right.
obviously a bulk of what we do. But luckily things like studio, obviously talking to fine people like you guys
Oh, okay.
and doing that collaborative type of stuff
Yeah.
via technology. Podcasts and I'm doing a comic book. That kind of stuff can all continue.
Oh, is
But
that it
yeah, the
behind you?
performance
The-
is crazy.
Is that poster the comic book in the back?
That's
No,
Oh, that's your.
no, but I have a copy. That's a Secret Army poster. This is the comic book,
Oh,
Oh,
wow.
like hiking a
Sons
bit.
of the Sun.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it is Hike Navet. Yeah.
That's awesome, man.
Very cool.
Yeah, the first one's called Hike the Hero. The second one is called Vahan the Dragon Reaper. And they're like, the concept is basically a story in a story. So it's like, there's two different times in each issue. There's the time of the storyteller, and it's usually like more medieval to, late classical to medieval period.
Okay.
In somewhere in Armenia, and then the story is ancient Armenia. So there's like an ashug who tells a story to a bunch of villagers. In the first issue, it's Sayat Nova, but in each issue, it's going to be a different ashug telling the story. And then
Has the
a different
first one
story
come out
in
yet?
the story, if that makes sense. Yeah, the first one's out. It's already sold out, but
Wow.
Really?
people can order the digital version and stuff.
Oh, where
Yeah.
can they order it from?
So am I allowed to? Are we already going, or are we or
Yeah.
is it? Can I ask? Am I allowed to
Sure.
say? Okay.
Whatever you
They
want.
can get it through my PayPal, which is okay. They can get it through my PayPal, which is info@DanielBedrosian.com, or they can get it through Cash App, which is just $ Daniel Bedrosian, and then or Venmo, which is @Daniel Bedrosian. And it's $20 for the digital version.
Oh, cool.
US, $20 USD for the digital version. And yeah, I did a very limited pressing of the comic, and it's sold out really fast. It had taken me forever to get it done. So, by the time it was finished, I mean, I'm not really doing this for any company. I self-published. So,
Okay.
but by the time it was done, I was like, wow, okay. So I couldn't do this if it was like a deadline for a monthly book.
Yeah.
Because there's just so much went into. For one, the artist, who is incredible, he's from the Netherlands. He's of Indonesian parentage. So I gave him, and as he's so brilliant, he'd been wanting to work with me for years, a fan of P-Funk, and I had loved his work for years before that. And so we got together, but I had to give him sort of a crash course in Armenian everything, you know what I mean? Because it's like, here's this very specific culture with, 8 to 10 million adherents globally, very specific, not quite this, not quite that, not quite up, not quite down. So, and then history, literature, music, costume, geography, ancient culture, medieval culture, classical culture, what they would have worn in this village. Oh, they wouldn't have worn that outfit in this village. They would have, because it's over here. They would have, so we were just like trying really hard to, And, you know, I had a letterer and an editor, and so it was a whole process. But now that I've done it once, I feel like the second one's going to be really quick in comparison. So we're working on the second one now, and I'm using a different artist for every issue because I want to make it as hard for myself as possible. No, because it's kind of just to get stylistic variety, you know?
Yeah.
For the ODAR readers out there, I don't want them to fall into one assumption of what Armenian is, because it isn't any one thing, as a lot of, you know, people have stated. So I want to get different styles. I want different colors and things to kind of be evoked in people's minds. And that's also actually for the Armenian readers too, because an outsider only knows what somebody is telling them.
Yeah.
Armenians create falsehoods of their own.
Sure.
Yeah.
Imagery that is supposed to be, this is what it is and this is all it is. Like, I love when somebody says, oh, she doesn't look Armenian, or he doesn't. What does that mean?
Yeah.
Because genetically we come from like 15 different haplogroups, and that's just the male side. The female side, equal amount. So what does that mean? Look, what are you talking about? You know.
But you know what? I have to admit.
So there's a lot of stuff we have to.
We did the same thing with you at the time, because we were watching a P-Funk video.
It was the Tiny Desk one.
Tiny Desk one, and because he's P-Funk, and then he goes, you know, the keyboard player, he looks, I think he might be Jewish.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not sure. He goes, I'm gonna check.
Okay. We both gotten that ourselves.
Yeah, we get that too. You know, I'm born in Israel. You know, I'm Armenian from Israel.
Okay.
And when we looked up, oh my God, he's Armenian. We go, no, we got to talk to him. You know.
Then we went down the rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Nice.
Once we saw your biography, well, we're gonna need to have an interview with this guy like at least a few times to cover everything.
I'm down.
To the historian.
I'm down.
You know?
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, you know, I get that a lot. I get people will say, "What are you?" You know, and I do get Jewish sometimes. A lot of times, I get really interesting like answers of types of Jewish. Like, other Jews think that I'm, or Jewish people who are guessing I'm Jewish think I'm specifically Jewish from Yemen.
Really?
Yemeni Jew. I don't know what that is. And then it's, you know, in if I'm in Detroit, people think I'm Chaldean, even though there is a big Armenian, there's other big Middle Eastern populations there. A lot of times they think I'm Chaldean if I'm in Detroit, or Syrian. I've gotten Syrian a lot. Yeah, it's kind of a funny, it's like a funny thing, you know. You know, but it's like I try to have a penchant for being able to pick out Armenians. I always make, this is my little stereotype about myself. I'll be walking with my friend. I'll be like, he's Armenian. That guy right there, he is. And be like, how do you know? I just know. But you know what? Like, 99% of the time, I'm right. So it's kind of funny because I'll walk up. I'll be like, you know. And they'll be like, oh, hi, okay, cool. Oh, wow, it worked out.
I mean, we all do that. We always want to pick off the Armenians, or we look at credits, and you know,
at the end of movies.
You know, it's we're people that's always in survival mode. So it's, you know, it's I guess it's things that we do.
Are you currently in Florida?
Yeah. I've lived in Florida for, 18 years. Since I graduated from college. Grew up in New England, born in Massachusetts, educated in New Hampshire, University of New Hampshire, graduated in 2003, moved to Tallahassee, been there ever since. But I recently moved like way out in the country. So if my signal is bad, I really apologize. And then what that has to do with is Xfinity wants $200,000 to lay the line, to lay the you know. Yeah, so I'm not gonna give them $200,000 and then start paying them every month. You know, it's a little bit. So I had to take, Country Joe's deal, you know. And so Country Joe gave me the deal. It's kind of, it's a little, so I hope I can convey what I need to convey, and you guys can see me well enough.
So far, so good.
Yeah.
And we were wondering, of course, about George Clinton, and I just want to have just a feel of like, how was it to like meet somebody that you idolize and play with them?
Yeah.
Well, as someone it was my favorite band growing up, and for now it to be, he's my neighbor. We live down the street from each other. He lives not even a half a mile. Oh yeah, that's why I moved down here. That was the whole reason I moved here. Okay. But now, there was definitely a decade where I woke up every night and pinched myself, on the road or in my bunk, like, I can't believe this is happening. But it's been, I've been the keyboard player for Parliament-Funkadelic for 18 years now. Wow. So it's a long, and I'm now the longest I'm proud to say I'm the longest tenured keyboard player in P-Funk history, which is saying a lot because it's a 65-year-old band.
Yeah.
Thank you. And it's also one of the few unbroken tenures. So I started doing work for George as long ago as '98, but outside of playing keyboards. As a teenager, that's when I first met him, 17, so he looks at me, he saw me grow up, you know what I mean? So I've been working for him even longer than I've been on the road. Been on the road 18 years, been working for him for 22 years, really. But my tenure on the road is unbroken. As soon as I joined the band in '03, I never left. So it's, that's something to say, considering that we're on the road as much as we are. That's a lot of other musicians be like, damn, Danny, you're still doing it. Like, that's a long time to be on the road and touring. It
is.
But if you're good at it, or if you can do it, if you can handle it, if you like it, you should do it.
And from all those shows that you've done with P-Funk, you've been on a lot of shows like David Letterman. I saw that, I don't know if The Roots was part of that too, playing with The Roots, but you sang for The Roots. No, you didn't play, right?
Yeah. Well, I sing too. I grew up singing in choir, and in addition to playing piano, so music all around was something. My whole family plays piano and sings.
Yeah.
My parents ran a piano school for 50 years, and my sisters and I all had to enroll. Additionally, my father was the choir director and my mother the organist at churches that they worked at for gigs. So we were all in the choirs for years, singing multi-harmony parts and reading music for playing and singing. So yeah, I was singing for The Roots, but that was actually on Jimmy Fallon, and that was only a few years ago. The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon. Okay. And The Roots are the house band.
Yes.
So George and 3 of his backup singers and myself, but I was coming more in a music director capacity, because basically The Roots wanted to play these P-Funk songs, and of course, George wanted his own band, but they had to do it a diplomatic kind of way, because there was actually an actual musical guest that wasn't George. George was just sitting in with The Roots throughout the whole night. So we played all the ins and outs, all the music in and out. So it was a much bigger commitment than just playing being the musical guest, which I've done many times, including on The Tonight Show back when Jay Leno was the host, and also Letterman and all that stuff. But, being with the house band, you're sort of performing a multitude of songs. Now, luckily for us, with our knowledge or whatever, they were P-Funk songs, because The Roots got George on as the guest, and they wanted to highlight that fact. And George, of course, being George, he wanted me to be there to be able to, he likes to call me the band, what does he call me? The band musicologist. So like, I've really prided myself, and it probably comes from my knowledge of history and just the fact that I love this band, but like I have a really good, keen memory and a good database in my head, so to speak, of P-Funk's discography. And not just its discography, as I like to say, and I sound like a broken record to my bandmates, they always laugh at me when I say this, but the canon. The canon is super important. Like it's the it's not just the way it was played on the original, it's the way every subsequent guy on each instrument played it and how that changed live through the years. If there was a different band director, they'd make an arrangement that was different. It changed the whole way the song is performed, heard, all kinds of things. So he likes to have someone obviously like that. And so I'm that guy a lot of times. The Roots have 2 keyboard players, so I would sometimes 3. So I was like, you know, I'm not gonna, you know. So they had me singing backups because I also sing with P-Funk, and also they're in just sort of kind of like a mediatory role to help George, because George, and talk about impeccable memory. That man remembers every session he's ever done, wow. ever, and he's this great producer. But he's never been a musician, as in a player. He doesn't play any instruments. He was a singer, he was a writer, he was a producer, an arranger. He is all of those things. A CEO of his brand and a conceptual mastermind. But he doesn't play any instruments, so he needs a guy like that, or a few guys like that, really, in most cases, to to navigate when he's trying to get something across, you know. I remember another time we were playing with somebody else, remaining nameless, and George was getting mad at him because they kept doing the pickup to a different song that sounds kind of similar. He's like, no, that's not that, that's that. He's like, oh. And then he'd be looking at me in the van later. He's like, that's why I have you come with me. That's exactly right. I'm like, okay, all right, gotcha. Because, like, you know, he's trying to convey to the person in the best way possible, in his way. And he is this master communicator. But of course, when you don't play an instrument, you obviously want to have people around that not only know you, and also, go ahead.
You're an interpreter, basically, when it comes down to that.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, it's that's why he calls me sort of the musicologist of the band. And more so than, there's not really a music director right now, which is interesting because, like, there's almost always been a music director in this band, but George in the last few years has sort of taken the music director reins to himself in a way. I mean, he always was the band leader, always, and always the front man and lead vocals and all that kind of stuff, but like also music director now, if that makes sense. In his getting older, he's actually gotten a lot more succinct in his approach to how he directs. Granted, I wasn't in the band when he was way younger, and I wasn't born yet, et cetera, but I have a really good working knowledge from not just seeing the shows, but working with, growing up with, and living with all of these guys who were. So, like, just to compare it, like, now is a sort of unprecedented time in terms of how he chooses to direct on stage. And much like, say, James Brown, which he's always been like that, you have to really know what he's saying, if that makes sense. You have to know what he's saying and how he's directing. You have to know that the motions, the movements, the hand movements. There's also a lot of mouthing. I mean, it's super loud music, and he's mouthing. You know, you have to know what he's saying. You have to read lips.
It's funny that you mentioned James Brown, because I saw him a year before he passed, and he wasn't. He just sat at the keyboards the whole show, and it was in a small venue here in Montreal. And you know, I'm going, like, we're all expecting him to move with, you know, do the James Brown moves, whatever. But he just had a few girls dancing on each side of the stage just to create movement on the stage. But he sat at keyboards all the time. I didn't even know he played keyboards, you know.
Yeah, he always would do that, like, one part of the show. He would go and sit down and play the organ. 1 or 2 parts of the show. But, you know, more so than his maybe ailing health or the erroneous assumption of such, it may have just been that you caught an odd night where he decided to do that. You know, him being the master of his own domain, it's his, much like Joy, it's his toy box, and how he wants to approach the toy box from night to night. A lot of the country guys, the American country singers, were like that too, and how they're like, oh, tonight so-and-so did this crazy thing that he's never done before. And they'd be like, oh yeah, that was just that night. You know, so it might have been something like that. It also could be something more practical, like maybe he fell and hurt himself and he couldn't do his routines. Like that kind of thing. You got to think about it. Man was up in his 70s, 80s, performing night after night, hours. I mean, so it could easily be something like that, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you've played with...
Which, by the way, that was my first concert, James Brown. That was my first concert ever. My father took me to the Lowell Auditorium in Lowell, Massachusetts. I mean, other than classical concerts that I had to play at, that was the first concert I ever went to. My father took me, probably 89 or 90, I'm going to say.
Wow.
And changed my life. That's really what introduced me to the funk as I know it. And then P-Funk was right behind that. After that, it was like, then I found out about P-Funk through sampling. And then immediately after getting my first P-Funk album, they became my favorite band, genre, anything of all time.
So you
for a number of reasons, but
you found out about P-Funk through G-Funk. That's what happened.
So to speak, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, essentially, yeah. I first started listening to P-Funk probably 91, not too long after my first James Brown show, maybe 91, 92. And I had found out about it through lists of samples on the credits of hip hop albums.
Right.
Ice Cube, Public Enemy, yeah, the G-Funk stuff too, Dr. Dre, NWA, stuff like that. And just being like, oh, now what is, I gotta go, again, the historian in me I gotta go back and find this. What is the original like? You know, and as soon as I got my first, and this is the days of cassettes. As soon as I got my first P-Funk cassette tape, it was my favorite anything. And, you know, I was only 10 or 11, maybe 11, but it was, I had already been playing piano by that point. For almost a decade by that point. So I was already playing not just classical concerts a multitude of times a year and doing competitions and all that stuff, but I was already playing in bands by that point. The kids around me were playing either metal or hip hop. So I would bounce between the different cliques because I was kind of like the working piano player in the area for my age group. And there were kids who were doing heavy music, like early hardcore, because a lot of that grew up out of that area. And kids were doing hip hop, like Boston style hip hop. And they needed me for both roles. But I also, in both roles, felt like there was something missing. There was something else. I also grew up singing church music, singing gospel. I grew up playing classical. I knew Armenian music. You know, I grew up with that at the picnics and church and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And always loved jazz and R&B. But all of that stuff put together, that's sort of how I felt about George's music. It was like, not only was it super contained, like you had Bernie Worrell, the original keyboard player, who's classically trained like me. So it's got all this theory, crazy theories.
Yeah.
But it also was just everything under the sun, you know, and it drew me to it as a musician.
We saw you play on YouTube, Anushigarchik, I believe it's called. And I was very surprised.
Okay, yes.
Yes, your voice was like, we were very surprised with your voice. You had, you know, I mean, you're a good singer.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you. I pride myself on, you know, you have to do different characters. And I think our roles as Armenians is really interesting in diaspora, at least. We've had this diaspora that's been around ever since the first time we were invaded. So it's this really huge, all-encompassing thing. And since the genocide, our intelligentsia exists really in the diaspora. I mean, there's great, smart, brilliant people in the Republic, but there's so many Armenians around the world that now we have this intelligentsia in the diaspora. And in that, we have these like multitudes of lives, you know? I grew up playing Western European classical music. I fell in love with West African-influenced American pop music. But when I sing in Armenian, even if it's a dialect that has nothing to do with my upbringing, I feel something. I take on a different voice. It's hard to know what your true voice is when you live in such a, I don't know, because we're so in tune with our identity.
Yeah.
And I think identity frames so much of what we are that I myself pride myself on my variety, which is kind of averse to identity, but not against it. But then whenever I get in tune with the identity, I immediately fall into that thing. And
that is well put.
Maybe because of my historical knowledge, or maybe, oh, thank you. Maybe because of my knowledge of history or whatever, I feel a spiritual kind of connection to it, and it just sort of takes me there. So like a lot of times with the Armenian music, in some ways I was relearning, and in other ways I was tapping into something that I'd already forgotten, my collective self, if you will. So yeah, it's something I really love to do.
Okay. And you've played with a multitude of artists like Kendrick Lamar, Erykah Badu, Shavo Dajian from System of a Down. Which performance has been the most memorable for you, or your favorite?
For some reason, immediately comes to mind is Sly Stone, because Sly was another one of those, like, to me, it's like the triad of funk is like James, George, and Sly.
Yeah.
And Sly was always a big influence on me because he played keys. So, and his vibe is just, when you listen to a Sly Stone album, it's just this all vibe, and that just always impressed me, And in my time with George, because George and Sly are like best buddies, in my time with George, Sly has come up on stage, sat in with us, performed with us, like veritable performances. And there's one time that comes to mind immediately. It was at this big festival. I think it was the African Festival in Chicago. I want to say 2009, maybe. And he came up and did Want to Take You Higher and Thank You for Letting Me Be Myself Again. But he came up with his guitar and went up front and did it. And it was like, wow, Sly Stone. He's like going, like, because most of the time he'll come up on the keys. He's really a keyboard player, but he plays everything. He plays all the instruments. But like, he'd come up and be able to get behind the keyboard, and he can kind of do his subdued, in the back, sort of isolated, whatever type of thing. But like, see him up front like that, that was like Woodstock or something. That was like, the Sly Stone you saw when he was fronting the Family Stone. So it was very impressive. And I think all of us in the band, even guys who had been in the band for 40 years, were like, oh, wow, okay. Like, that was like really very impressive, It's interesting, like my connection with some of these people that, like with Kendrick Lamar, for instance, like we did studio work together. Same with Shavo, but I've also performed with Shavo on stage as well. And then there are some people in the hip hop game where I've only performed with them live. And then there's others in hip hop where I've only performed with them in the studio, so it's like different. And there's some that I've only done like Ice Cube. I performed with him like maybe once or twice, but he was in the music video with us for the song that we did with Kendrick Lamar and Ice Cube. And so like, working with him in that way, and some of these guys on stage as well, but it's different sort of layers of getting to know these people. Like I worked with Mike Judge, who did, Beavis and Butthead and King of the Hill and all of that stuff. And we did the Tales from the Tour Bus cartoon TV show series that's like about, there was one season was all on like outlaw country, and then one season was all about funk. And we did, obviously, the funk season, and we did a whole episode on P-Funk, and I got to help make the music for the show and do that kind of stuff. And Mike Judge was in there, working with us. It was very hands-on, very cool. That's awesome. So like different, the most recent, like right before the pandemic started, is the Trolls World Tour. Where we did a new version of Atomic Dog, and then the second Trolls movie is like kind of a big deal, just like the biggest digital release of all time, and so very proud. We did the release party, but when things were still going to be in theaters, we did like the big in Hollywood. We flew home, and then it was COVID, like right away. Like we probably shouldn't have even done that show type of thing. And that's the last show P-Funk has played. I think it was March 16, something like that. And that's like the last show we've played up until the, you know, the pandemic. But I was really proud to be on that because, you know, that's a movie my daughter watches 5 times a day. You know what I mean? You know,
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying? Like the kids are crazy about this.
Yeah.
And so it's really cool to see how P-Funk has sort of permeated different generations through film. And it's not like George is in a ton of films, but like his, besides the sampling thing, as you very eloquently stated, because it's very true. Besides the sampling thing, his like random appearances in like very rare kind of cult flicks has also been like a big way that maybe a lot of non-African Americans or even just African Americans who were too young to know Flashlight or Atomic Dog are finding out about Clinton and the band. And like, I know in my generation, and you guys probably aren't too different age from me, in my generation, it was PCU, you know? So when PCU came out, it's just kind of like a college movie, cult film, but I was 12 when that came, 13 when that came out, and everybody was like, oh, it's those guys were in PCU, and that's how people found out sort of about the band. Then like a whole generation later, it was Good Burger. The next generation of kids were finding out about P-Funk through the Good Burger movie. And then now it's Trolls, you know? So it's like really interesting, like, because George has a whole mythology in that movie. There's a whole funk country and he's the king of it. And it's like, but I think it was one of the most gratifying moments of my life to, not just in the theaters when we saw the release, but watching it with my daughter and her friends for the first time and hearing my synthesizers that I created, like not just parts I played, but I made the sounds for the song. So it was like to hear my sounds like in a motion picture and how well it was mastered. Like it was like, wow, that's kind of blew my mind. That was really cool.
It's a big deal, man, for sure, for sure.
By the way, thank you for the age comment.
Thank you.
I'm actually 23 and he's my dad.
I'm 52.
Oh, okay. I just figured. Okay, gotcha. All right. Well, I'm in between you both. I'm gonna be 40 in January. So,
Cool, man.
so actually, I wasn't wrong. I can sway both ways.
Yeah.
And on the topic of synths, since you mentioned that, because I'm a musician myself, I love gear. I'd like to know, what are you using nowadays? Are you endorsed by any companies?
I'm endorsed by quite a few companies, actually.
Cool.
Well, for one, it's right. You're talking about synthesizers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right here. This is my main go-to synth on stage, and even on that record. This is the Novation Bass Station 2.
Awesome.
It's a little guy, you know. But I make my own sounds on here. All the sounds you hear me play on here, I make myself, and that's it's funny because when I first started working with the Novation people, like, you know, they were thinking of this instrument as essentially a bass. But I'm like, well, listen, you guys are the ones who put the octave knob on here. It's a lead as much as it is a bass. So I do all my like searing lead stuff on there. I do synth bass on there too. Flashlight, the famous Parliament song, the synth bass line, I do on that now instead of the Moog. Which at first some people were like, sacrilege. You're not doing it on the Moog anymore. I said, listen, I did it on the Moog. Did it on the Moog for like 16 years. And there was 2 decades where it was being played by an electric bass. So you talk about I mean, what are we talking about here? So, but I love that synthesizer. Love that thing. Also, on the piano side, I work with Casio with the Calviano Grand Hybrid piano that they've made, the digital piano. The thing is a beast. It's in my living room. I do actually 90% of my recording, if not more, on that, because it's a full-on, it's like a digital baby grand almost. It's got the real felt hammers. It sounds amazing. The weight is perfect.
Wow.
It's got incredible sounds, but it's also, I run it through Logic. I run it through Logic and play the Logic sounds on. I do my drums on there, like all kinds of stuff. And you know, it has all that. And I fell in love with the thing the first time I played it. I'm like, you guys they made something that really not only competes with like the Yamahas and those, but in some ways beats them because of the way they have it made. And they also worked with Bechstein, the great German piano maker to make that. So it's got Bechstein's seal of approval, like we're going to put our name on this too. So it's like some serious stuff. Yeah, so I have that. I work with them as well. I'm endorsed with them as well. And then the band, we've also got endorsements with Moog and with Roland. I use the Roland RD2000 on stage with the band. It's actually right next to me, but it's too big to just kind of pick up. But and then I use other stuff too that I'm not necessarily endorsed with, but I don't always divulge. And then I also have endorsements with these guys right here, JBL, AKG, and Harman.
Nice.
And they make all the microphones and the speakers and the headphones and the everything that I'm using in terms of all of that electronics. Even my speakers on stage, my subwoofer on stage, and my monitors, powered speakers are all through JBL and AKG and Harman. We have the whole band has a collective endorsement with them. And I also have an endorsement with one other company, Keith McMillan. They make a bunch of stuff, but I use one very specific thing with them. They have the K-Mix. It's an audio interface programmable mixer that I use with them. And I actually recorded most of my most recent albums with, because it's just super user-friendly, and I'm able to control EQs within EQs within EQs between my program and that interface. And it's more than an interface, and it's really smart and still sturdy and utilitarian. Gets the job done. So those are the main things that I use gear-wise.
Cool. In terms of your music, where could people get the music? Is it like on one of these streaming services, or is it like something they would have to download?
So as far as my discography and all that stuff goes, if you're looking for any of my albums or any of the albums I'm on or any of the albums I've produced, you can get them anywhere music is streamed or downloaded. Okay. Any of the streaming or downloading sites, you can get that. If you're looking for physical product, some of those places, best way is through me, and those same links I told about before, PayPal, Cash App, and Venmo, to the name, and we can maybe share the links or whatever. It's the same one for the comic book. And I have a really big discography. Like I'm really happy I'm talking to you guys, because my newest album comes out this coming Thursday. Wow. It's called Exaltation, and it's and it's the newest Danny Bedrosian and Secret Army. Yes. Well, it's one of the ones. I've been doing a few different projects for Artsock. This one, it's not the single that I did for Artsock. That was a different thing I did, Azadun Kasab, and people can still get that and download that anywhere as well. And all the proceeds go to Artsock, and I double them with my own money. This one will also have some of the proceeds going to Artsock, to One Armenia, to Armenia Fund, and that type of stuff.
Very generous.
But this one is an album I've been working on for a very long time. Secret Army puts out an album every couple of years. I've probably been working on this one for about 7 years. And even in the time that I've been working on this one, 2 other Secret Army albums have come out. So it's not like it was held up for other albums came out. Yeah. And other solo albums of mine came out. I think this is my 18th. This is my 18th album in name, under my name, so that I've released. So it's and it's probably my favorite in over a decade, if not one of my favorites ever. I'm really proud of it. Like I said, I've been working on it for a long time, but also when I got COVID, I was working on this album. When I thought I wasn't going to really make it the next day because I couldn't breathe, I was still working on this album. Wow. And a lot of the stuff a lot of the stuff before the war dealt with the existential sort of existence of Armenia, the existential conflict that Armenians have in our neighborhood, in the highland, and how much we've lost to aggressors and colonists essentially around us. And without getting too political, and a lot of the songs were about that. And then months later, the war reignited. And so I was like, wow, okay, so whatever I was talking about suddenly became very apropos. Whereas before, I think if it had come out and the war hadn't happened, it would have been looked at as very couched, pseudo-psychological, hints, and only the Armenians would have gotten it.
Yeah.
You know? Now that that's happened, it's like, okay, it's very obvious what he's talking about, especially since most of us in the diaspora have been going crazy ever since it happened.
Yeah.
So like I was like, I work with the same artist. He does all my Secret Army albums. Nathan Boucher, American artist. I've worked with him on all my Secret Army albums. And we had a whole different thing that we were doing where it was like, it just wasn't being conveyed right, though. I wasn't getting it across right to him, and he wasn't translating it right. And we have this really good working relationship where we toss ideas back and forth, and we do a lot of trial and error before we get to the final product. In the end, with this one, I was like, listen, I have to put this out because it just needs to come out. It has to come out. And listen, put the flag of Artsakh on there. That's what I want. I want the flag of Artsakh as the cover, and that's all I want. And he was like, oh, he's like, well, send me a copy of it. I sent it to him. He's like, oh, this is amazing. So he kind of did his own take on it, but it's not lost on him. But you know exactly what it is when you see it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, you know exactly what it is. And I wanted to dedicate it to them, you know, because everything I had been writing up until this point was like for an idealized version of us, a version of us that we can be as Armenians. And then the people of Artsakh turn around and just became those people. They always were, whatever, however you want to put it. And their bravery and their steadfastness and their just ultimate complete sacrifice in this postmodern era. The same kind of sacrifice that our ancestors gave up in the genocide and other massacres untold about now. Astounded me to the point where I was like, okay, I'm making this whole thing for them. I mean, it's basically for them anyway, but they went out and said, oh, that thing that you're idealizing, that thing that you're creating, if you're pretty art, we're that. We are that. And it was like, okay. I mean, you know, you already know, but this is for them. You know what I mean? So, so I dedicated it to the people of Artsakh, and yes, a portion of the proceeds are going to be going to the same funds that are going to be going towards, you know, One Armenia Fund, Armenian General Benevolent Union, and all the places where they're helping the people in Artsakh.
Good. And the name of the band and the Secret Army, is it just you, or is there like other members to the band?
Oh no, it's a full-blown band. Like, so I started Secret Army in 2006. The rhythm section is mostly the bulwark of the rhythm section of P-Funk. So
Wow.
most of Secret Army's history, the drummer has been P-Funk's drummer. And our founding bass player, Lige Curry, is the bass player for P-Funk. Blackbyrd McKnight, who plays lead guitar, is also the lead guitar player and erstwhile music director for P-Funk, long time. Current drummer for P-Funk, Benzel Cowan, is our drummer now. So it's mostly made up of my fellow bandmates from P-Funk, but there have also been other people in the band as well. Like when I started, I think it was like a 10-piece. It's been maybe as much as a 12-piece, but for the most part, when you see us live now, we're like a power trio. And it's bass, keys, drums. And it's just, you wouldn't know it though if you heard me just say bass, keys, drums. You listen to a recording, you'd be like, there's a whole bunch of stuff. I don't know what it you know? But that's what we go for. We try to really fill up the sound. And I've liked it the best as a trio, but there have also been some great performances as like a quintet or a sextet, septet, etc. So yeah, it's a bunch of constituent members over the years.
Very cool.
And once this is all over, hopefully near future, all this COVID, and we go back to normal, would you ever think about coming to Montreal and perform, or have you ever?
Yeah, the first time I left the country ever in my life was actually to go to Montreal when I was in college with friends. So I've been to Montreal even before I started touring. I've been to Montreal. But in addition, you know, P-Funk, we played there quite a few times. I've never played there with Secret Army, but P-Funk has played Montreal several times. I mean, I've played there with P-Funk maybe, I'll say 4 times, 5 times maybe in my tenure.
Okay.
I know we did the last time we played there was the Montreal Jazz Festival.
Oh,
But we also did the Montreal Jazz Festival at least 2 other. Yeah, and we've played that at least 3 times.
Okay.
And then there's also a club. I don't remember the name. I don't remember the name. It escapes me. But we've also played this other club in Montreal at least twice. So I can recall, with my foggy memory, I can recall at least 5 shows in Montreal in my 18 years.
Maybe
spread across
Metropolis?
that time.
Metropolis?
It's more of
That might be it. That might be it.
Or Spectrum?
Yeah, that could be it.
Yeah.
And
Oh, Spectrum.
it was Spectrum.
Spectrum.
Sadly, no longer
It
exists.
no longer exists.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. Makes sense. Par for the course, I guess. Yeah.
Actually, King Crimson recorded a live album there in the 80s.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Huh. Wow.
Check it out.
Very cool.
It's on Spotify. It's everywhere. Yeah.
And so what
Okay.
plans for, I'm sure you'll keep yourself busy, but what are the plans for the next, I don't know, few years?
Going back on the road.
Well, yeah, back on the road. I mean, as of now, just assuming that everything's going to be okay eventually, we do have shows on the reschedule from this year. So, like, we were supposed to go to Europe in June, I think, and that got canceled. Well, it got rescheduled, and because we go every summer to Europe, and as far as I know, unless it's been changed, I believe that all of our European dates have been pushed to May of 2021.
Okay.
So that's over the direct horizon, but just, yeah, continuing to perform, hopefully, as long as everything goes. But I think the sort of, I don't know how to put this poetically, but the sort of positive way of looking at this whole situation is that those of us in the arts, yeah, we've definitely suffered, like, both in our environment and in our ability to make money the same way.
Yeah.
But in being resilient, and I guess being Armenian has something to do with this for some of us, being resilient, being able to get up when you get knocked down and be like, well, how can I do this now?
Yeah.
How am I going to approach this now?
Yeah.
Can benefit those of us who were able to adapt. Yeah. And like, for me, I found new ways. Like, the first thing I did that I'd never done before was I started this, like, request line. And I did this for several months. I did this from, I want to say, March or April all the way to about September, maybe August. And it was just people sending their requests, their donations. I send them a video of whatever song they requested. You mentioned King Crimson. I did a King Crimson song.
Wow.
I did a King Floyd song. I did a Pink Floyd song. I did a Rod Stewart song. I did a bunch of classical, a bunch of gospel, a bunch of R&B, country, pop. I did a Taylor Swift song. I did just like things that are totally out of left field for me.
Are these on
But
your?
not only was it, you can see some of them. I posted some of them, and I regularly post, like, P-Funk songs and classical stuff, because those are my 2 main go-tos in my regimen, especially classical. But yeah, I posted some of my favorite requests on my Instagram. If you go back to, like, March, April, May, June, July, you'll be able to see them on my Instagram page. And I mean, as far afield as from, like, Luther Vandross to Armenian folk songs to, like, just the Beatles, to old work songs, all kinds of stuff. So yeah, it was cool because not only did it continually open me up to different ideas, songs, had to constantly learn new songs every day. That's cool, stuff that, like, maybe you've heard, maybe you haven't, maybe you've always been kind of familiar with, but never thought you would ever want to learn. And now you're being forced, not forced, but it's just a good experience, good challenge. And I think it makes you a much better musician in general. So did that for several months. Continuing on with the comic book, which I wasn't sure if I was going to do or not, but in pandemic times, a comic book is about the best thing you can do because you're working with these different entities over many miles, and through technology. So it's all very doable, as well as studio work. Like I said, finishing the aforementioned Exaltation album by Secret Army. I've been finishing that up all through these months. And then just doing sessions. You know, I've always done sessions from home. I have a production company, publishing company. I handle sessions, keyboards, vocals, arrangements, whatever you want. And so, you know, my clients continually hit me up from all over the world and do that. And then also something that I never really did too deep before is now I have a whole bunch of piano students. I think I did it a little bit in college. And, you know, my parents did it their whole lives, you know, so I grew up with piano teachers. But doing it myself at this level was kind of interesting. I got a bunch of little kids, and they're like my little proteges. And I dig it. You know, it's cool. I can't keep too many because eventually when we go back on the road, it's going to be like, sorry, everybody, you know. But I have a few, and I do value because that's kind of a weird learning thing too for a musician. Yeah, you learn, relearning, going back to like really rudimental stuff. Yeah. And you're like, you know this. But then like tomorrow during your regiment, you're like, wow, why am I so like, I feel so on point. Is this from like counting quarter notes with kids? You know, there's something to that. You know,
for sure. Back to basics.
Yeah. So Danny, thank you very much for today. We just came through everything we wanted to talk to you about. We have so many things we'd still like to go in depth with you. So I think if you don't mind, we could connect again in
do this again sometime.
Like in a month or so, and maybe it'll be a series.
I'd be happy to.
Oh.
Rafi, Kevork, I really appreciate it, you guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Danny, and all the best of luck to you.
Nice meeting you.
It was a
pleasure
pleasure meeting you.
Thank you, my brothers. To you guys as well.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Take care.
Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.